Hey to all metal maniacs, we are back again with another Essential Albums video here on the Iron Horde channel. Another episode going through a particular style or geographical location, mostly covering the 80s heavy metal scene. This time round I'm not following any of those two criteria though, but instead I will be focusing on the gender of the vocalist. This is why for this episode, with particular insistence from my partner Chiara, and I would like to take this opportunity here to thank her for the help with these videos, especially the photography and the thumbnails, and every now and then even with some ideas. As I was saying, for this episode I will be focusing on 80s heavy metal bands which were fronted by females. I'm going to choose my usual 10 albums which I believe represent these female fronted bands in the best way. So beer is here and onwards we go to the video. Let's go! Thanks for joining us again for this video. If you're new here, the aim of this channel is to review albums and festivals, suggest bands, delve in the cultural aspect of heavy metal in general, and more. So if you're interested in this content, please consider supporting this channel by subscribing, liking and sharing our videos on social media. Now, how many times have we heard or read metal is strictly a male subculture? Countless times, I guess. Well, at least for me growing up, I've heard this a lot, and one cannot deny that there is some kind of truth in that. The aggressiveness, the rage, the macho attitude are surely attributes which would be associated mainly with men. But I think as a general, the contribution of females throughout the years has been somewhat underrated. And this is why in this video you will find females that didn't just sing with these bands, but they were an integral part of the whole band, and above all, they have their own reputation through their talent and their charisma. Another point I would like to make is that unfortunately the general idea is that female vocals are mainly operatic and within the fields of gothic and symphonic metal. Whilst that is a scene in itself which I don't find myself liking that much, the truth is that females since the 80s and even, mind you, in the 70s rock scene, they always brought that aggressiveness which is generally synonymous with males. And I would like to emphasize this point because there are some misconceptions here, especially in the broader heavy metal community. In fact, in this list I have included bands which are traditional heavy metal, but not only. I included bands which are power thrash, speed metal, thrash metal as well, and a mix of both. This is to show that females were an integral part, not only as fans but active as band members with a great stage presence. On this video I decided to list the albums chronologically from the oldest to the latest, because it is interesting to see the trajectory of the sound more than anything. I love all of them equally, and it would be very, very difficult for me to name even the top 3 in here, let alone choose my favorite. Anyways, without losing any more time, let's go straight to the first album, which is, as I said, even the oldest on this list, and I'm referring to Girlschool and the album Demolition, released in 1980 with Bronze Records. Lemmy's favorite band, some might say. Yes, he helped them kickstart their careers and had them tour with Motorhead for a while. This is not to say that Girlschool achieved success just because they had connections, but they truly are a quality new wave of British heavy metal band. Plenty of catchy hooks on this debut record. It has a feel of the 80s pubs, whiskey and tight leather. it is definitely a fun album to put on. Vocals are split between 3 of the members here. In future releases, guitarist Kim McAuliffe eventually takes over vocal duties, adopting a raspier also approach. On this record though, vocals are clean and more melodic. It's a record produced by Vic Mile, known for also producing Ace of Spades by Motorhead and having collaborated previously with Led Zeppelin, The Who and Hawkwind, amongst many others. In fact, the production here for a 1980 debut record is really good, and all the talent of the girls really comes out on this album, and for me remains my preferred album by Girls' School. Some of the highlight tracks are Demolition Boys, Take It All Away, Emergency, and possibly my favorite, Deadline. Next in line, I decided to include a band that brings a different style than the previous record. I'm referring to the album Coup d'Etat by the US band Plasmatics. The Plasmatics, fronted by the eccentric Wendy Orlean Williams, started as a punk band, and their first 2 records were more, in fact, punk than metal, but that fusion that was heard in their second album really culminated in this record. Even the EP before this, titled Metal Priestess, alluded to this so-called transition, and that is why I decided to choose this record from their discography. I'm fully sure that this band and other bands from the early 80s adopting the same fast and aggressive style were a big influence on the thrash metal scene, which at the time was kind of in its infancy. The Plasmatics were also renowned for their chaotic, destructive live shows and outrageous theatrics. This included chainsawing guitars, destroying speaker cabinets, sledgehammering television sets, and blowing up automobiles live on stage. With regards to this album, I remember I thought that Wendy was the female version of Lemmy, only later to discover they had covered No Class on this record. Not only that, a few months after the release of this record, Wendy and Lemmy did a split together titled Stand By Your Man. Unfortunately, in 1998, Wendy committed suicide with a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the woods near the house where she lived. Highlight tracks here would be Stop, Lightning Breaks, Country Fairs, with my favorite being The Damned. Third album on this list, and we go back to another new wave of British heavy metal band like Girls' School. I am obviously referring to the band Rock Goddess with their self-titled debut record released in 1983 with A&M Records. Rock Goddess consisted of sisters Jodie and Julie Turner and Tracy Lamb on bass guitar. Their father, John Turner, who was also their manager, owned a music store and some rehearsal rooms and used his connections to book the band for some gigs and even the famous Reading Music Fest, after which they got signed with A&M Records. This record also produced by Vic Mile, just like Girls' School, and it has the same sound, the same vein here, very well produced. Again, this is one of the positive aspects of this album. Considering the young age of both sisters, it is quite impressive that they were able to produce such a consistent record. Plenty of catchy riffs and melodic guitar solos aided by a good rhythm section, and Jodie's raspy and rebellious vocals created an album that stands the test of time. Unfortunately, they came a bit late to the new wave of British heavy metal party, and that is why they have somewhat passed under the radar, but the energy released in tracks such as Heartache, My Angel, One Way Love and heavy metal rock and roll cannot be denied. My favorite track here though would be Take Your Love Away. For the fourth album on this list, I'm jumping straight to mainland Europe, more precisely to Germany, and mention the band Warlock with their debut record Burning the Witches, released in 1984 with Mausoleum Records. Mausoleum Records, the legendary Belgian record label I have already mentioned in the Dutch-Belgian Essential Albums video, which I'm linking up here. Anyways, Warlock is one of Germany's premier heavy metal bands with the iconic Dorothy Pesh, aka Doro, on vocals, possibly the heavy metal queen. The band was founded in 1982 in Düsseldorf by members of the underground bands Snakebite and Beast. Throughout the years they supported some heavy metal heavyweights on tours such as Wasp, Judas Priest, Dio and Megadeth. Warlock are like a copy of except with female vocals, and I say this as a compliment, of course, as they incorporate in their music that kind of Teutonic heavy metal components, which I had mentioned as well in my German heavy metal essential albums video, which again I'm linking up here for ease of use. The production could have been given a bigger boost to the sound of the instruments, although all in all this record has a good mix which helps this album quite a bit. Tracks like of Sign of the Satan, After the Bomb, Homicide Rocker and Hateful Guy really captured that 80s heavy metal sound, but my favorite here is the title track Burning the Witches. Really an excellent metal track and one of the best to come out from the 80s German scene. Let's up the tempo here a bit and go for something more in the vein of thrash and speed metal. Hereby I bring you the album Recognize No Authority, released in 1986 by the US band Detente. Take Possessed and mix them with some Megadeth and you get this band. Some incredible fast riffs mixed with some conventional tempos will keep you guessing throughout this record. Add to that the raw shrieking style of vocals by Don Crosby, and this really makes this record one that shouldn't be missed, especially by thrash and speed metal fanatics. Don's vocals even sound to me like they're filled with suffering and pain. I don't really know how to explain this, but I guess when you are hearing them you will understand what I'm referring to. Unfortunately, Don Crosby died in 1996 of liver failure associated with a history of alcohol and drug abuse. Production is quite good here, especially that loud snare drum is really recognizable and gives this record a very chaotic and frantic feel at times. All tracks are quite short and straight to the point, makes this record a condensed cauldron of out-of-control thrash metal. The highlight tracks on here for me would be Losers, the instrumental Catalepsy, Shattered Illusions and Life in Pain as well, with the favorite track would be Russian Roulette. Continuing on the same style as with the previous record, I now bring you the album Depths of Death by the band Sentinel Beast, also released in 1986 with Metal Blade Records. Come to think of it, 1986 was quite a good year for thrash metal, with albums such as Rain and Blood, Peace Cells, Morbid Visions, Doomsday for the Deceiver, Pleasure to Kill, Obsessed by Cruelty, Master of Puppets, and I'd better stop here because when you start realizing all this metal greatness was released in the span of a few months, you remember how great the 80s were. But anyways, with all these classic records, you get also two great records fronted by females playing the same aggressive style with Detente and now with Sentinel Beast. Two records which, apart from being great ones, kind of passed under the radar due to the embarrassment of riches that was 1986 with regards to thrash metal. Sentinel Beast, after a couple of demos, debuted on the Notorious Metal Massacre 7 compilation in 1986 with the track Sentinel Beast, before releasing this record. Whilst Detente emanated that kind of sorrowful and painful feelings throughout Don's tortured vocals, Debbie Gunn's vocals on here are more aggressive and let's go to war kind of feel. And personally, when the vocals instill in me these kind of feelings, that is when I recognize the ability of the vocalist in transmitting those sensations. With tracks like Corpse, Dogs of War, Evil is the Night, Revenge, which is possibly my favorite track on here, and the really good cover of Phantom of the Opera, this record is really a must-have for every metalhead. headbanging guaranteed. I'm not finished with the thrash and speed metal just yet. We move back to Germany now, and I bring you the record Finished with the Dogs by the band Holy Moses, released in 1987 with ARG Records. Funny name for a record label, but quite pertinent, I guess. Back to a more frantic style of thrash metal with Sabina Klassen on vocals, again similar to the previous two vocalists, delivering some of the grittiest and, I dare say, lunatic screams ever. I wouldn't laugh at those who would think this is actually a guy handling the vocals on here. Even the music here is relentless, riff after riff, tempo changes, pounding drums. Everything is top notch on this album. No wonder Holy Moses, who are still active today, have built up quite a cult following. And even if the records that followed are a bit of a mixed bag, even though the follow up to this one is really good, their live shows are always filled with plenty of raw energy and that appropriate dose of aggressivity needed in any thrash gig. A special mention here to Uli Kush on drums. You can hear his prowess on this record pretty well, and he really gives a greater dimension to the tracks. After leaving Holy Moses, he played with Gamma Ray, Halloween and Mekong Delta, amongst other bands. With regards to the tracks, most of them, as you might expect, are full-on high-speed metal. The only mid-tempo track on here, rightly inserted in the middle of the record, is Fortress of Domination. It is kind of a haunting and dark track, actually. Fits quite nicely too with the whole tempo of the record. Other highlights are In the Slaughterhouse, Military Service, Criminal Assault, and Finish with the Dogs, with my favorite being the opener, Current of Death. Anyways, 30 minutes of untamed, in-your-face, relentless thrash metal. Definitely must have also for any metalhead. And back to the US now, and we transition back towards the classic heavy metal style with a bit of speed metal thrown in. The 8th record on this list is Screams in the Night by the band Halion, released in 1987 with Halion Records. Founded in 1982 and throughout the 80s managed by Wendy Galaxiola, wife of Ronnie James Dio. In fact, this record has a lot similar to Dio's solo and Ozzy solo records. Imagine those bands with a female vocals, basically. Her name is Anne Boleyn, and her vocals are quite recognizable in the heavy metal scene. A little rough and raspy, yet there is a balance of melody and power in them, especially when she reaches those higher notes. Add to that her charisma, and what you have here is a born, as far as I'm concerned, the born front woman. What we have also here is a very underrated guitar player in Chet Thompson. Some great solos throughout this record. I have read, I remember somewhere, and this was just a rumor as far as I know, that he was the one that was going to replace Randy Rhoads. But there was some kind of clash with Sharon, surprise, and everything fell apart. From the start, this record shows its ilk, just like Anne's vocals, catchy, melodic and powerful. It has fun and beer written all over it. Tracks like the title track, Bad Attitude, Explode, Children of the Night, and the closer, Tower of Air, are all worth a mention. Never understood the two instrumentals though, are kind of odd for me in this record. My favorite track here though is the track The Hand. Off to 1988 now, and I have drafted the record The Voice of the Cult by the band Shastain, released with Leviathan Records. The band was formed by Shrapnel Records owner Mike Varney for David Taylor Shastain. Subsequently, Leather Leon was included on vocals, formerly with the Olger band Malibu Barbie. This duo released some amazing records in the 80s, 4 to be precise, this one being the 4th one of the lot, and the first one I have ever listened to, and that is why I decided to include this one in this list. There is a lot of US power metal feel in this record, and some thrash touches in some parts. Reminds me a lot of Omen and Liege Lord, for example, also Hellstar in some parts. By the way, I did an Essential Albums video on US Power Metal, which if you are interested, I'm linking up here as well. Dave Shastain's sharp riffs, melodic interludes and slightly technical excursions leave their mark on this record. But for me the highlight always was and will be the vocals of Leather Leone. For me personally, the best female vocalist in heavy metal, at least from this period of time, the 80s. The perfect mix of roughness and sheer power for me is unmatched. Highlight tracks on here are The Voice of the Cult, Live Hard, Share Yourself With Me, and the closing epic, Take Me Home. Really make this album a US power metal classic. Favorite track would be the trashier Child of Evermore. And closing this list is a cult classic and quite possibly the least known band from all those already mentioned. I'm speaking about the record Act of God by the band Snow White, released in 1988 by Road Racer Record. Back to thrash metal here with this record, and this is such a hidden gem. It is the band's second full length, the first one released 4 years prior to this one, and although it was a good record, this one over here surpasses it on all fronts for me. The band feels much more accomplished, more mature, and even Sue Sharp, aka Nicole Lee, on vocals feels much more powerful in her delivery. I remember the first time I heard them, the band that came to mind was Mortal Sin. But there are also similarities to Overkill. Overall, the way the tracks are constructed and delivered, they definitely brought something new to the table. One cannot deny that Ian Tafoya's prowess on guitars is one of the biggest highlights on here. The amount of diversity in the riffs and the tempo changes and creativity in building the tracks is all merit to his talent, both behind the guitars and even in the songwriting process. Unfortunately, the band, due to many reasons, failed to make it big at the time. Being from Chicago didn't help, as it is not known for being a metal city. I think their biggest export might actually be Trouble. Secondly, the cover art isn't really what we would expect from a thrash band. But make no mistake, this is one of the best thrash records ever, and clearly deserves much more attention than it has ever achieved. Shortly before they split up for a brief time, Debbie Gunn from the previously mentioned Sentinel Beast had joined them on vocals, and that would have been really interesting to hear some of the recorded material of her with the band, but unfortunately the collaboration was short-lived. Highlight tracks are To the Last Breath, Baptize in Fire, Thunderdrome, and Soldier's Creed, with the favorite track being the closing somewhat epic thrash track called Something Wicked This Way Comes, with the music that fluctuates from haunting calmness to frantic riffs back and forth. Truly an unmissable record. So that brings to a close this list of bands with females on vocals. All these vocalists have become iconic in their own right, as they were able to make space for themselves in a scene more so in the 80s dominated by males. Some focused on the shock aspect or the power of their voice or their aggressive approach, always pushing the boundaries of the music whilst remaining still within the parameters of the style of the genre. From classic heavy metal, as you have seen, to speed, to thrash, to US power metal, all of these vocalists brought their own style and made these albums better with their input. Needless to say, there were more potential bands that I could have added in this list, but as you know, 10 is the magic number in here, and therefore I had to make some tough decisions. If you feel I have left some important bands out, you are invited to list them in the comments below. Maybe I can discover also some new bands as well. Also, let me know your opinion on these records, if you knew about them already, which are your favorite tracks, if you have ever seen them live, this kind of feedback. Remember also to subscribe, like, click the bell, share this content on social media, forums, message boards, and whenever you think it would reach more metalheads. Great music always needs to be shared, of course, and we are speaking here about the greatest music ever. Nothing more to add, and as usual for me, stay safe and metal on. Cheers!